Think of prehistoric life, and what comes to mind? Towering T-Rex, long-necked Brachiosaurus, and armored Triceratops, right? For decades, dinosaurs were the undisputed kings of the ancient world. But what if I told you that the story of life on Earth is much, much older, and in many ways even stranger than the age of dinosaurs? Long before the first dinosaur ever hatched, our planet was home to a bizarre and fascinating cast of creatures that would give any Hollywood monster a run for its money. Today, we're winding the clock way back past the Jurassic, past the Triassic, to a time before the dinosaurs. This is the story of the lost world that ruled the Earth first. Our journey begins in the Paleozoic era, a vast stretch of time that started over 500 million years ago. Forget lush jungles and roaming giants for a moment. Picture a world dominated by oceans. The first real explosion of complex life, known as the Cambrian Explosion, happened right here. The seas were teeming with creatures so weird they looked like they were designed by a committee of aliens. Take Anomalocaris, for instance. Its name means abnormal shrimp, and it lived up to it. This was one of the first top predators on Earth, a meter-long swimmer with 2 spiky arms, sprouting from its face and a circular mouth that looked like a pineapple slice lined with teeth. It was the great white shark of its day, hunting trilobites, those armored, woodlouse-like arthropods that scuttled across the seafloor for millions of years. As we move forward into the Ordovician and Silurian periods, life continued its grand experiment. Jawless fish, covered in bony armor plates, began to navigate the waters. These weren't your typical goldfish. They were the pioneers of the vertebrate lineage, our own distant ancestors. On land, the first brave plants started to colonize the barren rock, creating the first hints of green and a world of brown and gray. And following them out of the water were the first air-breathing animals, tiny invertebrates like scorpions and millipedes. Imagine a world where the most terrifying land creature was a giant scorpion. It's a far cry from a T-Rex, but it was a crucial first step. Now, let's jump to the Devonian period, often called the Age of Fishes. This is when things really got interesting in the water. Jaws evolved, and with them, a new kind of predator. Meet Dunkleosteus, a true nightmare fish. This wasn't just a big fish. It was an armored tank with a head like a bolt cutter. It didn't have teeth in the traditional sense. Instead, its jawbones were sharpened into massive, self-sharpening blades that could snap with enough force to bite a shark in half. Reaching up to 30 feet long, Dunkleosteus was the undisputed king of the Devonian seas, a true apex predator. While monsters battled it out in the oceans, a quiet revolution was happening on land. Plants grew taller, forming the first forests. And from the water, a new kind of hero emerged. This was the time of the fishapod, a creature like Tiktaalik, part fish, part land animal. It had gills and scales like a fish, but also a flattened skull, a mobile neck, and sturdy fins with bones inside that were precursors to legs. Tiktaalik could do push-ups. It was likely pushing itself up in shallow water, looking around, and maybe even taking clumsy steps onto muddy banks. This wasn't just a fish out of water. It was the blueprint for every single land-dwelling vertebrate that would ever exist, including us. Next up, the Carboniferous period. If you love giant bugs, this is your paradise. The atmosphere back then had much higher oxygen levels, around 35% compared to our 21% today. This super-oxygenated air allowed arthropods insects and their relatives to grow to terrifying sizes. Imagine dragonflies like Meganeura, with wingspans the size of a modern eagle. Or Arthroplura, a millipede-like creature as long as a car, crawling through the swampy forests. And let's not forget the giant scorpions, some of which were as big as a small dog. These weren't background, creepy crawlies. They were major players in the ecosystem. The world was a vast, humid swamp forest, and the air buzzed with the wings of giant insects. Finally, we arrive at the Permian period, the last chapter of the Paleozoic era and the true age of pre-dinosaur giants. This is when the supercontinent Pangaea had fully formed, creating vast, dry interiors. And ruling this world were not dinosaurs, but synapsids. Synapsids are often called mammal-like reptiles, but that's not quite right. They were on a completely separate branch of the evolutionary tree from reptiles and dinosaurs. In fact, they were our ancestors. You and I are synapsids. One of the most famous of these was Dimetrodon. Everyone thinks it's a dinosaur, but it's not. That huge sail on its back, its sprawling legs, and its toothy grin, this creature is more closely related to you than to a stegosaurus. The sail was likely used for display, or to regulate its body temperature, soaking up the sun's rays to get a head start in the morning. Dimetrodon was a top predator, a powerful hunter of the Permian lowlands. But Dimetrodon wasn't the biggest beast on the block for long. Later in the Permian, a new group of synapsids took over, the therapsids. These creatures were even more mammal-like. They had more upright postures, and some may have even had fur and been warm-blooded. There were herbivores like Moschops, a bulky, thick-skulled creature that probably headbutted its rivals. And then there was the apex predator, the lion of the Permian, Gorgonops. Its name means Gorgon face, and it was terrifying. It was a fast, powerful hunter with long, saber-like canine teeth. This was the T-Rex of its time, a fearsome beast that dominated the landscape. For nearly 200 million years, this incredible menagerie of sea monsters, giant bugs, and mammal-like titans ruled the Earth. They were the stars of the show. The dinosaurs were nowhere to be seen, so what happened? Why don't we live in a world of gorgonopsids instead of going to see dinosaur fossils in museums? The answer is catastrophe. Around 252 million years ago, at the end of the Permian period, the world experienced the single greatest extinction event in its history. It's called the Great Dying. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia pumped unbelievable amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, triggering runaway global warming. The oceans became acidic and lost their oxygen. On land, acid rain fell and temperatures soared. It was an apocalypse. Life on Earth came terrifyingly close to being completely wiped out. About 96% of all marine species and 70% of land vertebrate species vanished forever. The magnificent synapsid empires of Dimetrodon and Gorgonops were shattered. The world they knew was gone. The Great Dying was a hard reset for life on the planet. In the aftermath of this global disaster, the few survivors found themselves in a new, empty world full of opportunities. And among those survivors was a group of reptiles that had, until then, been relatively small and insignificant. In the shadow of the fallen giants, they began to evolve, diversify, and grow. This was their chance. This was the dawn of a new age, the age of the dinosaurs. So the next time you picture the ancient Earth, remember that the story didn't start with dinosaurs. It started in strange oceans with giant bugs, and with creatures that carried the first spark of what would eventually become mammals. The dinosaurs had their time, an impressive 150 million year reign. But they were just one chapter in an epic story that's billions of years old. And understanding the world that came before them makes their own story, and ours, that much more amazing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next deep dive into the mysteries of the past. See you next time.